Welcome to the Travel Through Trauma podcast, where we dive into personal stories of resilience, transformation, and healing through the lens of travel. I'm your host, Ashraf Farassati, CEO and founder of Travel Through Trauma, a nonprofit dedicated to helping survivors break free from generational trauma and reclaim their lives through the empowering experience of solo international travel. In each episode, we'll hear from incredible individuals who have navigated personal challenges, fought through adversity, and found healing in places where they never expected. Whether you're someone searching for your own path to recovery or simply seeking inspiration, this podcast is for you. So buckle up as we explore how travel can heal the soul, challenge the mind, and open doors to new beginnings. Let's embark on this journey together. I'm thrilled to introduce Sarah, our inspiring director of language and culture. Originally from Colombia, Sarah has not only traveled to 11 countries, but has also dedicated herself to bridging cultural gaps through her work. Alongside her role with us at Travel Through Trauma, she also has a career as a project manager and a translator, bringing a rich blend of skills and compassion to everything she does. Currently in Finland, she's pursuing her master's in language, globalization, and intercultural communication. Sarah has shared vulnerably about her experiences with childhood trauma, particularly the challenges of growing up in a dysfunctional family. Her journey, resilience, and dedication to supporting others in their healing makes her story one you don't want to miss. Welcome, Sarah. I'm so glad that you're here. I was reflecting earlier this morning on how we met in Ecuador almost a year and a half ago, and we had bonded over our difficult and challenging relationships with our mothers. And we both really got to talking about how travel has helped us expand and heal and become more independent and feel a lot more accepting of our upbringing. And I'm just so excited for the world to hear your story, especially given that you grew up in Colombia. And I think that it's going to be different than a lot of the other guests who come here. And so you're going to be able to provide a very unique perspective.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I would love to hear more about your upbringing in Colombia and your relationship with your family and friends and how your upbringing really started to shape who you are today.
Well, there is a lot to it. Of course, I grew up, you could think like as a happy child overall, but in the midst of a lot of chaos, you could say my parents were not a couple who would understand each other when they argued, and it's still the day in which they're still together, but they're at the same time not. So growing up and witnessing such a relationship can be a very confusing thing, especially when you see your friends, your cousins, like the other people your age around you having what you would call nowadays functional families, and thinking like, okay, but why can I not have that? Like, it's constantly a worry, a confusion. And as a child, especially as an eldest daughter, which I happen to be, you're looking for ways to fix everything, because that's just the way you're brought into your family. You're told to, take care of your younger siblings, help your parents. So technically, you're growing up and already have a role that is a little too big for you at that point in your life. But you rise to the challenge and you try to do your best. I don't like to say that I was always an overachiever, but to this point, I still try to do things that then I look back and I think like, okay, how did I do that? Like, it was probably too much back then. But yeah, like there is an element of sweetness and innocence, like everything that comes with childhood, while at the same time having a lot of things that now I think no child should experience that.
That is so relatable. I think that especially as the first daughter in the family, you had to grow up so fast. And I'm sure maybe, and feel free to speak to this, that some of your childhood was robbed from you. And maybe you weren't able to have some of the childlike experiences that some of your peers got to have, given that they had more functional relationships with their parents and less responsibilities from such a young age. What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, from a point of view, it could be said I was not supposed to be so mature for my age, starting age 8 or 9. I was not supposed to be so smart and resourceful. You would never expect a child to be so resourceful and so witty when it comes to, okay, how do I fix this? How do I prevent somebody from getting annoyed, from getting angry? Or how do I protect my siblings? How do I protect the people I love around me from witnessing something they should not see? Because it's uncomfortable for me, so it's of course going to be uncomfortable for them. I still don't understand them and like what's happening, and they're younger, and I don't want them to grow within that. So from a point of view, you could absolutely say like I was a little robbed from that, but again, at the same time, there is something that comes with a lot of reflection and a lot of therapy too. Going back to what was good and seeing, sure, there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of pain, both from the outside and self inflicted, because at some point you just believe that you're responsible for everybody, when in reality, you're not. You're just a child. But at the same time, there was the joy of growing up with other things like loving friends, loving family. In the midst of chaos, you can still feel love. And to be able to recognize that just tones, the whole situation down and gives you a sense of, okay, okay, I went through something that was bitter and I could be bitter out of it, or I could just take my lessons from it, grow up, and keep walking.
Hmm. That's a very monumental realization to make in your journey of healing and acceptance about your past. When did you really come to that realization? Was it while you were still a child, or was it well into your adulthood after you had left that environment?
Oh, definitely. When I was able to recognize myself as an adult, and
Mm,
not a minute earlier than that. And it's not a matter of age, because I was always considered, oh, you're so mature for your age. You take like such good decisions, blah, blah, blah. All that comes with being too mature for your age.
right.
But after I started traveling, I came to connect with myself in a way that I had never been able to. Because for the first time, I was not responsible for anybody else around me. It was just me time. And it started with a month first solo travel, absolutely solo, to Guatemala. And in there was this constant of how do I fix it? What are others going to say? What are others going to feel? But then turns out it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter because the person who's living through this, whatever good, whatever bad, it's me. So
Mm.
what matters here is what I feel, what I have to say, what's my opinion on it. Do I even have an opinion on that? So well into my adulthood, I came to that realization like, yes, that was probably a lot for a child to take in. And then the more I moved, the more I traveled, the more I um, grew conscious around my life, my upbringing, and my behaviors at the time as well. Not just as a child, but then as a growing adult. I understood, like, sure, I went through some not very pleasant things, but at the same time, I could have had it worse. Let's just accept it for what it was. It was bad, and that's it. No, there is good and there's bad in every situation, and I can still pick up a lot of good from my childhood. And I think that's something that still fuels me to this day. Like the gratefulness that I feel for having been brought in such a loving environment, even in the midst of a lot of chaos around.
That's such an important realization to have, especially I think you gain that perspective when you start traveling and separating yourself from the environment that traumatized you. You get to see the gray areas in all your experiences rather than it being so black and white, like it's so horrible, or maybe the false notion that, oh, everything's fine and I have to pretend like it's fine. I think that being able to step outside of that environment can provide that perspective, which is so important. But I would love to rewind and understand what were some of the pivotal moments that led you to even take that first trip to Guatemala or even other trips that maybe helped you become more open to the notion of solo traveling? Was there like a specific trauma or incident that made you feel like I have to do this?
I would not point my finger to one particular event, especially because I still have a lot of issues trying to remember many things from my childhood. I remember bits and pieces from here and there. And if somebody tries to stimulate my memory and say, "Oh, do you remember when we did that or when we went there or something like that?" After a few days or weeks of jogging my memory, I might be able to rescue that memory. But I think it was a collection of a lot of moments, especially well into my teenage years and like my first very years of adulthood, in which I was a lot more aware of what was going in my environment. And although I disagreed and I was very vocal about not feeling comfortable, not feeling safe, not feeling okay overall, not feeling well in that environment, feeling very powerless to change anything around me, understanding that no matter how much I plead, how much I talk, how much I am vocal about what I want, this is not going to change. My mother is who she is. My father is who she is. Everyone around me, my aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody, my friends, everybody is who they are. And I am absolutely powerless to change them. And if I cannot change them, maybe I need to change something in me. But it's proven that I cannot do it here because I'm constantly in this loop, in this cycle of witnessing stuff that I don't want to see, I don't want to hear, feeling stuck in relationships in which I might feel I'm probably putting too much of myself, and definitely not getting an echo. Nothing's coming back, and I'm just drained. So I was, I think, 24 when I made the decision to make my first absolutely solo trip. I had traveled quote unquote alone before that, but you always find yourself in a tour with other students or with, other people just traveling to the same destination. So you don't really have that time to connect with yourself, especially with the rhythm of a tour or something similar. I also did some language exchanges back then. The time left to actually sit with yourself and think, why do I feel the way I feel? Why am I acting the way that I do? It's not there. So my first completely solo trip happened when I was around 24, 25. Time in which, again, I was starting to develop that consciousness that only when you're an adult, like an actual adult, you can get.
You mentioned a lot of things that are complete gems in what you just said. One, you talked about the childhood amnesia that comes with having complex trauma. I think that's something that we don't really talk about very often. But when you have ongoing years of trauma, whether it's low grade or high grade severity, your brain does try to defend itself by forgetting certain memories. And it can feel really scary when you don't even recognize certain things that have happened in your past and you can't remember or pinpoint, but you can feel it in your body. And you knew in your body that you cannot stay in this environment and that you have to exit the environment in order to discover something about yourself that you can actually control and something that you can actually heal. And I think the other really important realization is we can't control anybody around us. We can hardly change ourselves without putting all the time and energy and focus into it. Why do we think that we can possibly change somebody else? And coming to that radical acceptance of, I can't change my parents. They are who they are. The only way that they'll change is if they choose to change. And unfortunately, I think there's a certain level of acceptance that we have to have that our parents may never choose to change or may never see their part in these events that happened in our childhood. Or even if they do recognize it, maybe they just don't have the tools or the willpower to make the necessary change. And coming to that acceptance is absolutely necessary in order to find your own happiness and not be a victim of your own life and your own childhood. And because you do not allow yourself to wallow in your victimhood ever. And I think that's what makes you stand out is you take control of your life and you move forward.
Thank you. But yeah, there is this thing that people call the body keeps your score. It keeps a score of everything you do. There's a book about this. And I think it's not just I'm stressed, so I'm getting ill from being stressed. But there's also like your body is like a recording machine in which you're constantly adding new like adding new connections. So how did I feel in this place? And it's very likely that the next time you go back to it, you'll feel the same. And then talk about reliving a trauma day in and day out for years in the same place. At some point, it's impossible to coexist with that place. And it's never going to be the fault of the environment, let's say. And at some point, you need to hold yourself accountable and ask yourself, what am I doing for myself to make myself feel better? There was this point before I started traveling in which I was completely aware. I had started therapy probably a year earlier than I chose to start traveling, but I could like feel the effects of therapy just, you know, giving food, let's say, in myself. So I was able for the first time to say no, to set a boundary, to actually understand like how do I feel and what do I want out of this interaction, this situation. Do I even want something out of it? Because I probably don't. And what it has to offer is not beneficial for me. But with all of this process of learning how to say no, learning to read my body, because that's something that sometimes when you still live in that constant cycle of stress and in the same situation day in and day out, you just learn to ignore your own body. And sure, this feels unsafe, but I'm so used to it that I'm not going to do anything about it. It's the same old, even though it feels unsafe and even though it's keeping me like with a high alert constantly and I am fighting everybody around me. That's when I notice like, eesh, if I don't do anything right now, I will fight the entire world with or without cause. I don't need a cause, but if I have it, I'll use it. If not, I'll make one up and I'll burn every bridge I have at my hand, being it my mother, that after multiple years of her trying to own to her mistakes, own to her ways of being, and me becoming more accepting of her and also of myself. Who am I has a lot to do with who she was when I was a child. Then, when I was a teenager, who was she and who I was being molded into? Then I became a woman, and okay, now we are very different people, but does it mean that we have to fight all the time? No. But I need to take a step back, come into perspective, and it doesn't mean just one more perspective. I need 500 more different perspectives to heal this, just to prevent, burning every single bridge that I had in my hand. Because, like it or not, life is made out of every connection we make. You and I would not be sitting here talking and probably reliving a little bit of the first interactions we had, working together, trying to build something beautiful out of our experiences, both the good and the bad, if we had not connected. And understanding that was what led me to, it aided in the decision. Do I really want to burn everything, disappear off the face of the earth, and, go to a fishing village, learn how to fish, change my name, and pretend that I never met anybody? Or do I feel like this still has fixing? And by this, I always meant like, does my life has fixing? Can I fix what's not working? In that time, it felt like everything around me was not working. Not my job, not my studies, nothing. Because I was not working emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely. You I think it's really resonates with me. I think from the point of view that your ability to even identify your emotions in your body can become so numb because you've lived in a constant state of dissociation. And dissociation is what protected you from having to really endure the intensity of the experiences that you had growing up. And while it was a survival mechanism in our childhood, like you said, as you transitioned into adulthood or womanhood, you began to recognize that life is in your control. and that you can no longer allow others in your environment to influence the way that you feel. And thank goodness for therapy, because I think that's a very pivotal first step in our healing before we even embark on our travels, in order to even begin to identify our own thoughts and our own emotions and be able to label them, so that we can start to see what's what. Because otherwise, it's like our nervous system is at a baseline of high stress. And if we don't know anything beyond that, that's just our normal. And that's not healthy. We can't live under those kinds of circumstances for the rest of our lives without, like you said, burning every bridge that we have, because that's the only way that we would be able to react or respond in order to protect ourselves again.
Yeah.
And I think even you being able to come now to your mother and look at it from a different lens and say, what is a different perspective that I can bring to this situation? Not for her, not even necessarily for the relationship, but for your own health and well-being, for your own sanity, so that her energy doesn't affect you so much. And given all this work that you've done, what is your relationship now like with your family, your siblings, your parents?
The relationship with my siblings growing up was very tricky. Eldest daughters generally might be a little villainized because they say they are so manipulative and they get what they want. They can mistreat their younger siblings. And to all of that, I plead guilty. However, after growing up and being able to recognize them as let's say, as people, just as I was, going through the same things, exactly in the same boat I was, that was, I would say, probably the first relationship I built when I started to gain some awareness, some consciousness of, okay, I want this to be better. At least I can have them. So we started rebuilding. I had a lot of sorries to say to my sister and to my brother, to both of them. And with a lot of time and a lot of care and a lot of talking, we got through it, and we're currently the best of friends, regardless of where we're at, because we're all in different corners of the world. But at the same time, I know that I can ring the phone any day and they will pick up. If they don't pick up, at least they'll send a message like, hey, it's everything okay? And even if it's not like, ooh, let's worry about each other, we can just sit and talk about anything. How's the weather where you're at? What are you doing? What's new in the gym? Are you growing I don't know, new muscles? My sister loves the gym, for example. And that's something I never appreciated growing up, but I understood as my first and probably most important connections. And then with my parents, that is still a work in progress. I mean, all of the relationships are work in progress, that including that with myself. But being able to see them as people who are capable of failing, lying, they were not heroes or villains for that matter. They were people, and they also had a history. And regardless of what they decide to make with that history, I decide to make something new with them. And it started to, also give some results in the way that I know how to interact with them, what to share with them. So we, regardless of the closeness we may have, at least we can have healthy conversations. We are not on each other's throats constantly. We all can say, hey, I don't like how you're wording that. Or, I really don't want to know about that because it makes me feel uncomfortable. So let's talk about something else. And not feeling like I might be punished, which was always something very hard to do when I was little. Like, starting from saying no and everything that came after was impossible for me. But now I can say, let's do something else. Let's change the discussion. Let's share another anecdote. Because, whatever we're doing is not productive. And the same has gone with my friends. I constantly say, like, I don't have a lot of friends, mostly because I like to focus my energy, my time on very specific relationships that I've seen grow over time, that I've seen that I can be loyal to and receive the same loyalty back. And being as well able to say, hey, I was expecting more of you, or I was expecting something different of you. I thought we had this kind of friendship. Let's discuss. That's something that probably 10 years ago I would have not even considered. I would just say, like, yeah, bye bye, we're not friends anymore, burning bridges instead of building them. And I'm still working on, okay, let's build a bridge, let's talk things over. It's a part of growing up, and it's a part of healing that I think it's the most rewarding one, because in the process of healing and making sure you're not burning any more bridges, you come to the realization like, hey, I'm actually not alone, because that's a very recurrent thought for anybody who has any kind of emotional trauma. Oh my god, I'm so alone. Nobody understands what I
Mhm.
feel, what I'm going through. But then when you get to another point, you think, hey, what if I explain myself? Maybe they will understand.
That's the power of understanding your own boundaries and being able to set it fearlessly and having it be respected, because you are being vulnerable in that moment and sharing, hey, this isn't what makes me comfortable, or this affected me in XYZ way. And I'm sure maybe trying to set boundaries growing up, it was rejected, it was denied, it was villainized. But now that you are an adult, you are taking such a healing approach to advocating for yourself and standing up for yourself and being able to understand that self respect is self love.
Yeah.
And without that, you're never going to be able to build the types of relationships with your family, with your friends that you really want to nurture for the long haul. And I hear you. I think that quantity doesn't matter over quality. The quality of people that we have in our lives who are loyal and dedicated to the process of a long-term relationship, whatever that looks like, that's what matters, because it does have to evolve over the years. And I think that those tough conversations have to be had in order for these relationships to work authentically in the long run. So mad props to you for being able to come to that point. But I would love to shift gears and learn a little bit more about how travel has really helped ignite that healing in you. And whether it was your first trip to Guatemala or all the trips thereafter, what how did travel become such a significant part of your healing?
I think it's probably a universal experience of the solo traveler, that you're in the plane alone, probably, at least for the first flight. And why do I say at least for the first flight? Because it's not just my experience, but that of a lot of other people I've encountered while traveling, that they meet at a hostel and all of a sudden they just gained a travel companion for 2 3 weeks, where I've seen cases of 2 and 3 months. And I bring this up because I went into my first solo travel to Guatemala specifically with just one goal in mind. I'm not somebody who's constantly setting goals as is popularly understood. Like, I have to work to get there. But, what do I want to feel at the end of this experience? Who do I want to become, or at least get closer to becoming? And was happy, let's say. That was like the goal in mind. I want to feel happy. I want to experience how joy feels like on a daily basis. Of course, in real life with a 9 to 5 or school or everything else, it might feel far fetched. But when you have the time to do that, and you're at the right place and at the right time, you will find a lot of people who are in the same vibration, let's say, as you. So I came to know a bunch of people who were just, let's say, vibing in the moment, living very much in the moment, wanting to make the most out of each day, even if they just had to work that day. They were just living the most out of every second. And that became the inspiration to just keep on traveling. When I first met one of my very first travel friends, she is a very experienced digital nomad. I could see how careless she was in the best of ways, because she was very sure, like, wherever she was, that was home for her. And that was
Mm.
something that I was working on. Like, I want to feel like home wherever I am. Doesn't matter if it's my bedroom in Colombia or if it's anywhere else, my hostel room, or any place where I feel at ease with myself, that's going to be home. And I grabbed inspiration from her, from not feeling bound to giving results, let's say, to anybody. She's living the life that she wants. She's happy with it, and that's enough. And that helped me start setting bridges for, let's say, the wall of my first part of traveling, and then it just becomes a part of the process. Being away from home and exploring yourself outside of everything you've known for your entire life. I feel it might be comparable to moving out for the first time, except you're in a place in which nobody knows you. You
Mm.
don't have any friends yet. Your family's far away. And if you give yourself the permission and the time, you can find out very interesting things about yourself. I didn't know I liked hiking so much, and that's something I learned by hiking a volcano for the first time ever. Like my very first hike, I chose a volcano because why not? I learned that I love lakes, for instance. I knew I liked water bodies, but being so close to lakes was a different experience. I learned that I don't like to drink that much. And that's something that people will tell you, like, commonly in your 20s. Oh, you can drink, you're young, that's not going to affect you. Okay, but maybe it does affect me. Maybe I really don't enjoy it that much. So there was a lot of insight I was gaining about myself, about what I like, what I don't like, about how to interact with others, because up to that point, all I knew was how to say yes and please others and try to accommodate my time and my energy for whoever was in my life at that time, whether it was my family, my friends, my schoolmates, anybody who needed my time and my energy. I was right there. And understanding, like, you can go somewhere as long as you enjoy it. It was eye opening for me. Like, it feels obvious now. Like, if you don't want to, you don't have to go. But at the same time, I feel, especially we as women, are very conditioned from a very young age to say, yes, I'm going. Yes, I'm doing this, regardless of what we want. And
Yeah.
coming to understanding and doing something different, it can be a little shocking, but at the same time, I feel it's more liberating. It just makes you feel completely connected and true to yourself, which is something very hard to get sometimes.
Yeah, that's such a testament to the power of solo travel, specifically solo, because you are forced to be with yourself 24/7. And if you can't find home or friendship with yourself and your own thoughts, even if they're challenging and difficult and painful thoughts and emotions, then you have a really long, hard road ahead. And I think that being able to be open to the challenging and painful process of embracing yourself, becoming your own best friend, your own best company, finding home within your own body, being able to feel empowered to say yes or no to the things that you actually want, and understanding what it is that you even want, what you desire out of life. What are your patterns? What are your intrinsic beliefs outside of the beliefs that were fed to you growing up? I think that that's very, very important aspect of being able to carry on a much more authentic life moving forward, because now you know what authentic joy feels like. Whereas
Yeah.
before, maybe, at least for me, I used to think that happiness or excitement was the same thing as joy. But now, excuse me, now I understand that joy is deep contentment and peace. And I
Yeah.
don't have to utilize alcohol or drugs to get joy, because that really is, alcohol and drugs are utilized more for like excitement or energy or maybe even happiness, or maybe not. But I think it's a coping mechanism to something that you can achieve that's much deeper and profound and long lasting, which is peace. Peace with yourself, peace with your past, peace with your decisions, peace with your own body. And especially as women, young adult women in this world, that's something that's hard to find, because we are constantly fed with not only information and conditioning from social media and society, but also the expectations that there are on women within our families, being the caretaker, being uh, the decision maker, doing everything around the house. Like it's overwhelming. And who are you aside from all of that? And the only way to really discover it is to be alone for extended periods of time and go to places where nobody knows you, because none of your history can carry with you. Nobody knows your previous patterns. Nobody knows who you were in your real life. And so you can be whoever you want to be. You can actually have the power to choose what you want to feel in that moment. So amazing. I really, really resonate with that. I'm so glad that you shared all that, because I think it's extremely important. And the reason that we're doing travel through trauma at the end of the
Definitely.
day,
Yeah.
that's at the core of everything that we believe in. I would love to know more, like, were there any kind of challenges or setbacks that you experienced while traveling that really contributed to this self-actualization? Like, does any kind of specific moment come to mind?
I like the word self-actualization. I feel like that needs to be studied more, definitely. It's gonna give you a sense of peace within your purpose,
Yeah.
whatever that means for everybody. Your purpose is not saving the world if you don't have the tools for it and if you don't have a passion for it. And that's okay. That's something that I'm learning in the place I'm living right
Mm-hmm.
now. But going back into your question, yeah, there was one of my destinations. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but in my case, I arrived into one of my destinations all over South America. I had the best time ever, but this particular destination, I felt very bad from the moment I landed. Like that plane landed and my facial expression just changed
Where
for some
was
reason.
it?
I still don't know to this day. I mean, I can pinpoint like, oh yeah, the city was not what I was expecting, but that had never been an issue before.
Mm.
I come from a very large city, but at the same time, I grew up traveling with my family here and there to smaller places. So let's say, I'm very used to not just large cities, but also like a more quiet life in the outside of large cities, smaller towns, even rural areas. I'm okay with that. There was something about this place, just I was not feeling okay. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel at home, even though I knew I was okay, I was safe. I did not feel like it. And after consulting a little bit with myself, with my pillow, and with my mother, because that's when you want to call home and say, hey, I don't know what to do, I chose to go earlier to another place in a different area of my life, where probably if I had never started this journey of growing up, which is how I call it, I grew up outside of my cocoon and stopped playing victim and started playing person, I would have simply chosen to, oh, you know what? I've already booked everything, so I don't want to bother the hostel. I don't want to bother the plane company with a change of ticket. I'll just suck it up and stay here because I brought this on myself. And being able to understand, like, this can happen to everybody. I technically made a mistake thinking I could stay longer there, and I couldn't, but I can fix this. I have a voice, and the very least I can do is try to use it.
Hmm.
If I don't try to use it, I will not even get a no.
Yeah.
In
What's the worst
Colombia,
that could happen?
we have a saying that is uh el no ya lo tienes. That translates into you already have no as an answer if you don't ask. You are giving it to yourself. Why don't I give myself the chance of maybe getting a yes? The worst thing is that it will not change. It
Yeah.
was like probably one of the only setbacks that I've ever had. And also when while moving to Finland, I'm currently living in Finland. It took me a while to find accommodation, a very long time, meaning I was 5 days before flying and I still hadn't found a place. And that can be very anxiety inducing. Regardless of how healed you are, it can be very anxiety inducing. But I chose to do what I had at hand and say, okay, what do I know up to now? There are Airbnbs, there are hostels. I'll find a solution and work through it while I can find something permanent. In the end, it was not a setback. A couple days before flying, I got offered a place, which was okay. And I'm living there now, which is fine. But that's another thing that came to me during this growing up process. which was every single thing you can feel that it's a huge problem, it probably already has a solution. You just need to dig a little bit deeper and find it. Some of them don't even need that much of digging.
Yeah, I think that level of adaptability is what comes with just back to back to back experiences of being in new situations and new challenges and learning that you are extremely resourceful. And not because you're just barely surviving, but because you want to live authentically and you want to honor how you feel. I'm curious to know, what city was it where you felt extremely uncomfortable right from when you landed?
It was Mendoza in Argentina.
Oh, okay. Okay. And
It was not. Uh, uh, there are places in which probably you will not feel at home, and that's
yes.
okay. As long as
Yes.
you know that you can get yourself out of there, or that there is a way that you can make yourself feel more at home. There is always a way to pull yourself out of that despair, let's say.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to talk about is I think travel has become so glamorized because of Instagram or other types of social media where you don't get to see difficult, challenging moments where you really don't want to be in the place that you're at. It's either energetically it's not vibing with you, or the environment, or maybe the air quality. It could be any number of things that just make you feel like you're not comfortable, and nothing, no amount of time that you spend in this place is going to feel more comfortable for you. And being able to say, I have the authority to change my mind. And it's okay to change my mind because I don't know what I don't know. I don't
Exactly.
know that I'll land here and I won't like it. If I knew that, sure, I would have made a different decision. But you just can't, you can't read into the future as much as you want. So I think it's being able to stay adaptable and shifting and being like, okay, instead of wallowing in the problem, I mean, you can give yourself a few hours, maybe a day, to wallow in hating being in the place. But after that, it's like, okay, put on your bootstraps and figure out a solution because you got to get out of here. And when you do, you're just like feeling so great about the fact that you listen to yourself. Because that's happened to me a number of times. I mean, I could name probably five, maybe even more places right off the bat where I just landed. I'm like, I hate it here. I want to be out of here as quickly as possible. And I ended up
Same.
like eating the cost of all the things that I had booked to be like, oh, well, like I'd rather just like honor my sanity than to stay here all day, all week. Yeah.
Yeah, there is. It's exactly that. Honor your sanity. Are you feeling okay to do that change? Probably good enough to make that change, because otherwise you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And you're the only one with the power to make that change for yourself. When you're
Exactly.
solo traveling, nobody is there to advocate for you.
And you don't have to ask for permission from anyone either, which is the other great part about solo travel is you can just
But
make the
then,
decisions for you.
yes, but then there's this element with emotional trauma that no, like your brain is so used to not being given permission for anything
Mm,
that you start taking permissions away from yourself,
mm.
which can sound ridiculous, but that's how it works. So in the end, you don't give yourself permission to change your mind. I'll just suck it up.
Yeah.
How
It's like the
how is
more
that
noble.
going to work for your sanity? Like, it's
Exactly.
time to choose the best for yourself. And if
Yeah.
the best means spending a few hundred more in a ticket to a place where you'll feel better, just think about how many therapy sessions you'll be saving. You can girl math your way into buying that plane ticket, I promise.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a mindset of abundance that money will always come back and time will not. And when we think about how important and the resource of time is and how limited it is in our lives, we really start to value these little moments. Even a few days or a few weeks make a big difference for us. And then we have to make those really hard decisions. So I commend you for honoring yourself, giving yourself permission. I encourage everybody to just take a moment and give yourself permission to feel however you want to feel and make the decisions that other people would not agree with. But at the end of the
Definitely.
day, it's your life. You can always make the money back, but you can't make up the time or the sanity or the emotional experience that might come from being in a place where you're not comfortable. And it's just, in my opinion, the more you travel, the more inevitable it becomes that you will come across more places that make you
Definitely.
uncomfortable. Yeah, I think.
I do think it's important to clarify this, because sometimes words are a little bit left in the air. And giving yourself permission to do something, try something new, go somewhere new, does not necessarily equal every time do it for the plot. Just think about in 5 years, how do you want that plot to look like? Because if it's experimenting with substances or meeting with people you really don't like, the plot is just gonna you're not gonna like how it's gonna look. You're gonna feel like you wasted your time, your youth, your energy,
Yeah.
your resource, your time, your energy, your mind, everything is a resource. And
Mm,
in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, do you want to feel like you wasted it? Or do you want to maybe justify why you did it, but at the same time, deep down, feel like you wasted them?
mm,
It's not a do it for the plot invitation, but listen to yourself and then think about, do I do I have the permission right now from myself to do something that benefits me?
mm.
That's the whole idea behind this. Because sometimes you just want to do things for the plot and it's fun, but in the same way you give permission to yourself to do things for the plot, you should give yourself permission to do things that benefit you,
Yes.
even when they feel hard, especially when they feel hard.
Especially when they feel hard. Exactly. Because those are the moments that you bring back home with you and you realize, hey, I did that for myself while I was traveling. Now nothing can stop me. There's no obstacle where I have to succumb to it and minimize myself and shrink myself now to my environment because I know that I can give myself permission to do the things that make me feel better and honor my true authentic voice. And nobody else has to agree with it, period.
There is a lot of pride in standing up for yourself, and like people should start understanding that there is more joy coming out of I made a good decision when you go back a few months, a few years, and you think, oh, I actually made that decision and it was hard. I stopped talking to this person. I stopped taking substances, whatever it is. I stopped being lazy, procrastinating. All of those things, you can do them for the plot. What if I simply stay in bed and rot all day? You can do it. You can give yourself permission to that. But what if you give permission to yourself to move a little bit?
Yeah, a big what if. I think that prompt is so important. What if I could build a better life for myself? Because it's not about the mistakes, it's not about the problems. It's about how do you respond to these situations because we are human and our lives are full of flaws and our situations are full of unpredictable moments. And it's not about preventing these things from happening in our lives. It's about looking at it and responding to it rather than reacting and going back to reverting back to old behaviors or old coping mechanisms. It's more, how can I find a solution to move forward? What if I find a solution? What if I can grow from this? What if I give myself permission? I think
What if
these
it
are
works
really
out
good. Yeah,
as I
what if it
thought
works
it
out?
would?
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like 90 plus percent of the time, maybe 100% of the time, it will work out. And it might
Yeah.
take some years to look back at it retrospectively and say, oh, I see why that had to happen. And I'm glad I made that decision. Now it all makes sense.
And
Maybe
at
in the
the same
moment it
time,
won't.
what if it doesn't happen?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel like anxiety is very smart in trying to keep us safe. That's its job. But at some time, like it's more often than not, we tend to misinterpret what it says, like the end of the world, and it's crippling, and it makes you feel small and powerless and frightened. And when it comes to the truth, when you sit with the facts, because that's something very hard to do sometimes, sit with the facts. What if that person gets mad at me? Your brain is going to tell you it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
There's going to be chaos and everything's going to burn down. Tone it down a little bit. Your anxiety is not going to tell you, is not trying to tell you that's going to be the end of the world exactly like that. But maybe you're going to feel sad. And that's the
Mm,
truth.
yeah.
Maybe that person was not aligned with your best interest anymore. And that is good.
Or maybe that person never reacts badly and then you'll be pleasantly
Exactly.
surprised. And I think,
Which is, yeah, something that probably you and I both can see eye to eye. Like, okay, what if this person does not yell at me? I
yeah.
made a mistake, but what if they don't yell at me? Maybe they just want to talk calmly, like people.
Yeah. And our anxiety is really good at coming up with a million of the worst case scenarios. But like you said, when you sit with the logic, when you sit with the facts, and that's not to say that emotions don't have a place in decision making. I think emotions absolutely do. But something I've learned about anxiety is you're never going to feel anxious about the right decision. In like when you know it in your gut, like you have to honor yourself, it comes with a certain level of peace, not anxiety. And I think
Yeah.
maybe it can be a little bit of both, but you'll know in your heart when it's right. And sometimes you just have to take the leap and experience the reaction for yourself, because that could be revealing about who does this person serve in my life, or how do these patterns serve or not serve my purpose or my well-being, whether it's sitting on the couch all day versus taking a walk and going to the gym. How does this serve your higher calling? So I
Yeah.
think these are really important questions to ask ourselves. And I love that you've shared these perspectives. I would love to know, for anybody who is starting off on their travel journey, maybe they've been in a cycle of constant chaos their whole lives and they've never seen a way out of it. What advice would you give to someone who's hesitant to use travel to embark on a different kind of healing?
Analyze what's holding you back. It could be fear. Most of the time, it's fear. And then we start hiding that fear behind logic. Oh, it's probably just going to be a waste of money, a waste of time. I can work my way out of depression. Go to the gym and um, do push-ups and push
Weightlifting?
depression away. I don't know. You can hide behind a lot of stuff, but let's say routine is good. I'm not saying it's not. But the moment you break out of your routine and you find yourself as a little drop in an ocean, which this world can sometimes feel like, you can see how your problems are not probably the size that you tend to see them, which is something, it's a realization that's going to change your life for the beginning, like just for starters. And then again, you can always girl math your way into anything. Think about, if you decide to go to therapy, how many sessions is it going to take for you to actually unravel and untangle whatever it's bothering you? For me, it was a year and a half to begin with. And then it was like, therapy is not pleasant for anybody. You cry and you feel anxious and you feel fear and you feel anger, a lot of anger. And I'm not saying don't go to therapy. However, if you're postponing a journey that you know is going to be good for you, just think about how costly it's going to be to stay where you are. How many more
Yes.
therapy sessions you're going to need in order to address that.
And not
When
just the financial cost, but the time, the
and the health
energy.
that you're wasting in
Yes.
like those negative sensations in your body, the stress just accumulates, it builds up. You're gonna need physical therapy if you're already not doing it, or massages, or a lot of other things. Like, just make it financial, make it a financial decision. that's
Yeah.
that's one way to put it, because unfortunately in this world everything has a cost, a
Yes.
financial cost. And
And
yeah, you can
finances don't
just,
have to mean money. It could mean any kind of thing, any kind of
your time
cost.
too.
Yes.
How many walks and feeling dissociated, how many more days am I going to feel dissociated, disconnected from
Mhm.
life? There is a cost to everything, and there is a much simpler way of doing things. It might feel costly, it might feel difficult, but it's the only way of doing it. Just jump in. If you feel fear, do it with the fear.
Yeah.
Use it as a floating device.
Doing
We need to start
something. Sorry, go
using
ahead.
our negative emotions as tools,
Yeah.
because that's technically what they are. Anxiety is something that's preventing you from getting chased down by a tiger. Like, biologically, that's what it's telling us. There's danger, watch out. Fear has a very similar function, and at the same time, we tend to just over exaggerate what they're telling us. It's not going to be the end of the world if you take off 1 month to go on a very long date with yourself. You can
Yeah.
see it as that. I'm taking myself to dinner. I'm taking myself to breakfast. I'm going kayaking with myself. You will not regret it at all. I've met people actually who have seen how attached and how valuable their family is to them while traveling, and they choose to never do it again. And that's fine, because it's also part of getting to know yourself.
Yes. And I think the important part that you brought up is it's not about being fearless. It's about being courageous. It's about looking the fear in the eye and saying, I'm scared to my bone about making this decision to go travel alone, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that's
Exactly.
where courage and bravery come in, because in the end of the day, it's unrealistic to expect that you're going to feel comfortable with this. In fact, if it is in your comfort zone, it's probably what's not good for you. But if it's outside your comfort zone, that's when you know you're going to experience real transformation. And it's going to be scary. It's going to be anxiety provoking. It's going to bring up anger. It's going to bring up, things in your body that you haven't felt before. But that exactly right there is what you have to embrace in order to move forward and not backward. Thank you for
Exactly.
sharing your wisdom. That was beautiful. I'm so excited to hear people's stories about how they utilize their fears to actually be a tool to help them grow rather than letting it hold them back. I
It's time
appreciate
we
your
start
time so
gaining
much.
back, our bodily functions, and put them to the right use. Your anxiety is telling you that something might be off.
Mm.
The house is not burning, but maybe go check.
Yeah. And maybe it's off because it's better. Maybe it's better
Exactly.
than what you're used to. And maybe that's why you're getting anxiety, because you're not used to it. So, this is very important information. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I feel like we have to do more of these with you because there's so much more I want to dig into your past, into your life, into your experiences. And I feel like this will be the first of many if you want to come back on the podcast.
I'm down for it. I love talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. And I appreciate everything that you brought to the table.
I'm glad I could talk to you, and I hope this message reaches somebody who needs it.
Yeah,
There's hope. I promise. There's hope.
yes. And if anybody wants to contact you to ask you questions, to get your insight, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm constantly active through the travel through trauma social networks. So you can tag me and I'll respond.